Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. Well, hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast. And also, for those who are listening on release day, Merry Christmas! Today's episode is all about what to do when you are newly engaged. And that's because I know that lots of couples get engaged around Christmas time. And you might be one of the couples that has gotten engaged on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. And if that's you, congratulations. But regardless, if you have gotten engaged recently, you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed and thinking about all the things you need to do, and you might not know where to start. But that is exactly why I recorded this episode, because I want you to know about the few things that you should be focusing on now, and then everything else can wait. So something that I love to do on this podcast is to help couples to understand the order that things should happen. And it's not because planning a wedding is a perfect science, but it's really because there are so many ways that you can remove stress from the equation. And so today we're going to go through some things that are going to help you to set yourselves up well so that you can have a wedding planning journey that is as stress-free as possible. So why don't we get started? When it comes to planning your wedding and the things to think about right after you get engaged, these are the things that you should do. Number one, announce the news. Now, you're probably at a point where you have already announced the news, but I'm sharing this anyway because I know that some couples get engaged and then immediately start trying to figure out what to do. So the first thing is to announce your news. Tell your friends and family that you're engaged. Let them know that you've got a ring on your finger and that you're entering your bride era. And our expert tip is to start with your inner circle. So what you don't want to do is post something on Instagram and then, your future mother-in-law phones you and says, I had no idea. Make sure that you first tell your inner circle before you then spread the news a little bit wider. But the first thing you want to do is to really celebrate with your loved ones that you're engaged, because this is a milestone and it is definitely worth celebrating. Number two. Now, this is actually a thing not to do, and that is don't rush into the planning. And I'm completely serious when I say that you really just want to take a moment to enjoy being engaged. There's no need to rush into booking your venues and all the different things that you could be doing. You really should have a period of time where you just enjoy being engaged. You can celebrate together, you can go on date nights together, you could have an engagement party, you could have a little trip away together. Really just enjoy soaking in this exciting season of being engaged. I always recommend this to couples. There's no reason to rush into the planning and the doing. Just enjoy being engaged. It's going to help you to be present throughout your engagement if you start well by just pausing and celebrating. And we do have other podcast episodes about being present on your wedding day and, throughout the journey, like making sure that you are aware of why you're doing this and you remind yourselves of the whole reason for having a wedding in the first place. But it really does start with making a decision at the very beginning that instead of rushing, you're just going to enjoy being engaged. So do that. And once you've enjoyed being engaged for a little bit of time, and that little bit of time can be a different amount of time for each couple, you'll know when you're ready, you can then get organized. I promise you, if you can spend some time getting organized before you do any wedding planning admin, you will thank me. You will come back, you will send me an email, you will comment on a Weddings Online Instagram post, you will find a way to tell me that you're so thankful, because this is a game changer. Get organized before you start making decisions. It's going to help you feel on top of things throughout your entire wedding planning journey if you know that you're organized. So I have a few top tips when it comes to getting organized, so getting organized in general, but specifically around weddings, that is my very specific area of expertise. So get a free Gmail account. It can be anything. So I think the one that I had for my wedding was something like Hartman's Get Hitched. At gmail.com. It might have been Glenn and Kelly Wedding at gmail.com. It doesn't even matter what it is, just something that you can use for all your wedding correspondence. This is what you're going to use to register for your Weddings Online profile and the free Weddings Online planning app. This is what you can use when you talk to wedding suppliers and you're getting quotes and invoices and all kinds of things. This is what you can use to gather RSVPs. Basically, anything to do with the wedding will be associated with this Gmail account. If you're a spreadsheet person and you want to do things on Google Documents and Google Drive, it will also all be associated with this Gmail account. It's a genius tip because when you're doing things like, your regular work, you don't want to have a wedding email lost in a sea of work emails. And you also don't want to have your work emails get lost in a sea of wedding emails. It's quite helpful to compartmentalize. Another thing that's really helpful is if you can choose your wedding planning method. Some people are very into physical files and checklists and notes. If that's you, have that system and stick with it. It might mean downloading things and printing them. Whatever you do, that's your choice, is to have your physical, printed, and filed documents. Some people go electronic, so that's why I mentioned things like a Gmail, kind of Google Drive folder with spreadsheets and different things. And other people would like to use an app, and that's where the free Weddings Online wedding planning app comes in. The key here is to just choose your method. Talk to your partner, work it out together, pick your method and stick with it. But get yourselves organized before you actually start doing any planning. And then the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get your hands on a wedding planning checklist. Now, I can tell you that there are hundreds of decisions that need to be made, but it's really helpful if you know what you need to focus on now so that the things you don't need to focus on, you can put aside. So you might be thinking of the detail, like, oh my gosh, when should I have a makeup trial? It doesn't matter now. If you don't have a venue, if you haven't set a date, you don't need to know when you're having a makeup trial. So the wedding planning checklist will help you by giving you the exact order that you should do things. And it will literally say, with 12 months to go, do these things. With, 6 months to go, do these things. A week to go, do these things. It's like really, really comprehensive and will help you to know that you're making the right decisions and at the right time. And it'll also help you to make sure you haven't forgotten anything, because literally everything is in there. I used a wedding planning checklist that was basically the same as this one for my wedding planning journey. And it was the only thing that kept me sane. It was just knowing that I hadn't forgotten anything because the checklist covered it all. So if you look at the notes for this episode, I'm going to give you a link to a free wedding planning checklist that you can use. It will be a game changer and you will come back and thank me later. Next up, join the community. We have a Facebook group called Help I'm Getting Married, and there are over 70,000 engaged couples from Ireland in that group. What better place to get recommendations, to find support, to make friends, to be encouraged, to share all the things of your journey. That's the place to be. So I will also share a link to this group in the notes for this episode, because it's such a great thing to have a community of people. I'm sure you probably have friends and family who are super interested in everything to do with your wedding. You'll have people asking hundreds of questions. But there's something really special about other couples getting married in the same country that you are. They'll have recommendations. You'll have people posting about their actual wedding day once it's come. When people join the Green Folder Club, they're going to post about it and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, what is the Green Folder Club? Join the group and you'll find out everything. Next up, choose the type of wedding you want. Now, I always recommend that couples do this. Before booking any suppliers, it's really helpful to know what kind of wedding you want to have, because then you can choose the right suppliers. So, for example, how can you book a venue? How can you choose your decor? How can you organize, save the dates and all that kind of thing if you don't know what kind of wedding you want? So a few things you can think about. Do you want to have a big wedding or something a bit smaller and more intimate? Do you want to have something traditional or a little bit different? What kind of ceremony do you want to have? Do you want to get married in a church or in a garden? Who's paying for the wedding? Are you taking out loans? Do you have savings? Are you expecting contributions from friends or family? And then asking things like, are we set on a weekend wedding, or are we quite happy with a midweek wedding or something a bit different? Those kinds of things will help you to understand if you're going for an elopement kind of wedding or a huge wedding or somewhere in between. It just helps you to then start thinking about the types of venues you want to have, and if you need a different ceremony venue, all of those things. So spend some time really thinking about the kind of wedding you want to have, and then you will know what types of suppliers to start booking. And we will talk about the suppliers before the end of this episode, I promise. Next up, familiarize yourself with the legal requirements. Getting legally married in Ireland can feel very overwhelming and very complicated. And there are some things that are a little bit complicated, and there are definitely some things that have to get done in a very particular way. But I will tell you that we have got a podcast episode. It's episode 9. And we had some guest experts join in to explain everything you need to know about getting legally married in Ireland. That's episode 9. And if you are at the point where you are starting to familiarize yourself with the legal requirements, I highly recommend listening to that episode, because the suppliers that we had on the podcast were incredible. They were able to answer all of my questions to the point where we actually had a part 2, which is episode 10 of the podcast. And we just got so much information about types of ceremonies, the timelines, when to register your intent to marry, where to go. All of it is covered there. And so it kind of demystifies all the steps that you should take. So I highly recommend listening to that episode to get all the information you need. Okay, we've got 2 more things to do. Next up is to set the date and then start planning. And now here are a few things that you can consider when setting the date. Think about the time of year you want to get married. So when my husband and I were choosing our wedding date, we knew that we wanted to get married in autumn. I don't remember how we came up with the idea, but I remember driving through a part of Cape Town where we were living at the time, and I just remember seeing golden leaves everywhere. And I thought, this is magical. And we just kind of agreed. We were like, that would be really cool to get married in autumn. So for us, we knew when we got engaged, we were like, we would love to get married in autumn. Think about how long you want to be engaged for. So if you want to be engaged for less than a year, then consider the season. So if you are engaged now and you want to get married in autumn, then that could be next autumn, or it could be the autumn afterwards. Or if it's summer, it could be the next summer, or it could be the one afterwards. So think about how long your engagement is and roughly the time of year that you want to get married. Then think about if there are any dates that are special to you. So it could be, getting married on your dating anniversary. So I actually went to a wedding before where the wedding day was also the 10-year dating anniversary of the couple, which I thought was really, really special. It also worked out to be a Saturday for them, which was really cool. It was like just destiny. And then consider your venue. Okay, so this is a thing that we've spoken about a lot on the podcast, which is the chicken and egg scenario. Do you choose your date and then you find a venue that's available on the date? Or do you choose your venue and then you see when they're available and you choose your date based on the availability of the venue? There's no right or wrong way to do it. It really comes down to your preferences. So my husband and I, we chose our date because we wanted it to be autumn. We chose a bank holiday. And we wanted to make sure that that was our priority. So then we looked for venues that were available on the day. And the one that we found was perfect. Other couples are not super fussy about the date. They have an idea of the range of dates, like at some point in June 2026, for example. And then you look for different venues and you just ask for their availability. And then you pick a day based on when they can have your wedding. Do what works best for you. But the idea here is that you want to be at a point where you've gotten organized, you know what kind of wedding you want, you have a kind of idea of, how big or small the wedding is, and then you can start setting your date and choosing your venue. The final thing that you want to do in this stage of your wedding planning journey is to then start building your wedding supplier dream team. I actually have a whole episode just about this. It is episode 30 of the podcast. And in that episode, I listed the first suppliers that you should be thinking about. Like I mentioned before, when it comes to things like, you're already thinking about your makeup trial. Sometimes when it comes to booking suppliers, we can start getting worried about the details and we can be thinking about suppliers that don't need to be thought about yet. It's not that they're not important, it's just that some suppliers book up quicker than others. And so there's a timeline in which to make these decisions. So episode 30 of the podcast is where I've broken down the order that you should book your suppliers, who you should think about first, so that you're not worrying about all the suppliers to book, but just the ones you need to think about now. So, quick little recap. If you're newly engaged, these are the things to do. Announce your news. Don't rush. Get yourself organized. Don't forget about that Gmail account. Get a wedding planning checklist. Just check the notes for this episode. I've got a link in there. Join the community. There's a link in the notes for that too. Think about the type of wedding you want to have. Familiarize yourself with the legal requirements. It's episode 9 of the podcast if you want to listen to that. Set your date and start doing some planning. And finally, choose your wedding supplier dream team. And it was episode 30 of the podcast where I spoke all about that. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.